What's up, everyone? Welcome down to the vault. Alongside myself, I got my partner here, Mr. Walter Morgan. What's up?
Walt in the vault
Walt
today.
in the vault. Walt in the vault. Leave the spider alone, right? Yeah, he's all right. He isn't bothering anybody. Exactly. We're going to walk back in time today, aren't we, Walter?
We're going back in history to
This is a historic day. I
occasion.
Remember this quite well. So
we're going to set this up like this. This is about Exodus playing July 17th at two nights and the 18th at the farm in San Francisco.
July 17th, 18th of what year?
1986. And that's historic for one big reason. That was the first time that Steve Zetro Souza ever sang with Exodus on a stage.
That's right. That's my first gigs ever with Exodus.
So why don't you set it up and tell how you went from Legacy to that stage that night?
Actually, the kind of how it happened. Probably for about a year prior to me joining Exodus, there was always that underground speculation. You know what I mean? You always heard it underground. I heard it myself. I heard Zetro might, and I was like, no, they're not going to have. They'd never get rid of Paul, and they wouldn't, and
who would have thought?
And that sort of thing. And I got a call. We as Legacy, we never played with Exodus as much as the other Bay Area bands like Death Angel and Possessed and the other bands. They kind of all played. We as Legacy, we only played one gig with Exodus ever, and it was at the River Theater in Guerneville in '85.
I was there, and I was with Kirk Hammett
I believe it was
up in the bleachers, second row. And I remember that night because Kirk told me that night we were watching you, and he whispered to me that you and your band Legacy reminded him of when he was in Exodus, that raw talent that's going to go somewhere. And that's very true. He called it.
Wow. So we're at that show. It was the only show we ever played with Exodus. And then I get a call in June of '86 from Tony Isabella, who was Exodus's manager, saying, Zetro, what are you doing? Do you think you could come down to San Francisco to my office? I'd like to talk to you about some things. And I said, well, what would you like to talk about? She goes, we really want to talk to you in person. And I said, okay, cool. So I thought, oh, man, they're going to give us a show. We're probably going to do another show with Exodus. And we didn't want to deal with Alexis at that time.
And remember, you had the biggest selling demo of all time at that point in your career. So it wasn't like that's what you're thinking, right?
So I'm thinking we're going to go out with Exodus. So I get to the meeting, and I sit down with them, and Tony just says, well, Lexette, we're really not going to bullshit you. You're not here because of Legacy. You're here, because we want to know if you'd be interested in joining Exodus. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
And I was just blown away. I'm like, wait a minute. And, Paul Bailoff, is a very big entity and still is. And there's no disrespect to Paul at all. None at all. And this is just the true story is how it went down. And I guess, Paul liked to party back in the day. And Paul himself was a fabulous disaster. And the band being managed by Bill Graham Management, now looking at, trying to look at major label record deal, they needed somebody with stability, I guess, and
I think his pitfalls is sometimes he forgot his lyrics in some songs.
Some stuff he
was a little high. You never know what Bailoff you were going to get. But
believe
who
me,
didn't
Paul
love
was
him
Paul.
anyway?
I loved him. Paul was Paul. His persona, he loved Exodus. He lived and breathed band and metal, and he is thrash metal. I wouldn't say anything.
I think he's a John Belushi of metal. That's what I call him. John
he was
Belushi
an iconic. He's still an iconic figure. We pay very much. Still being in the band, we still pay very much homage to Paul. We do miss Paul. I miss Paul, and but basically at this time, they had just done a show with Anthrax in New York, and what had happened is he was late, or they didn't know where he was, and they didn't even know if he was going to make the flight. And I guess he showed up to the airport, like, ironically, right when they were going to leave. And he did the flight, but he was unprepared, and it was just awful. And I guess they had a really bad show. And
it was a big show for them.
When they came home, they said we need to make this and pull the trigger. And so that's when I got the call. At least this is what I
Didn't
was
the
told.
record label have something to do with it also?
I'm not quite sure about that.
You've
Walt,
heard
but,
that,
but you know, this is, you know, how I was told. I
You'll have to
asked
ask
about
Gary
what happened to Paul
when you get him in here.
and I said, well, you know, I wouldn't leave Legacy for anything, but to let everybody know, Legacy emulated Exodus. All the bands in the Bay Area, for as big as Metallica got and is and was, everybody still wanted to be Exodus, and so did Legacy. We loved what they were doing, and so now I'm getting the opportunity to join this
well-established.
band. You know, they have Bonded by Blood out. It's been out for a little bit over a year now, and everybody's playing it. I remember I went and saw Judas Priest in Sacramento, and I parked right by the where the cars drove in. It was like for Defenders of the Faith tour, and every car that was pulling in was playing Bonded by Blood, to the point that I pointed it out and said, listen to this. And there isn't one car that's not playing this fucking album. And it was in like the album that had just been out, maybe. It was the summer of '85. So it was on that tour. And here's this band asking me, you want to try out. So I did it. I agreed to audition, and I went down 2 nights in San Francisco at a studio called SIR Studios. And we did 2 nights of auditions totally under the wraps. And we had a long conversation after the second night, and they were like, we really want you in. And, so I knew this was going to go down, and it was a sad moment. I mean, Legacy was my band. You know what I mean? Those guys were I found Alex. Everybody knows that. Greggy, I wrote the songs with Eric.
They were crushed.
They were crushed. They were. It worked out great for everyone. So then I grew up with Chuck, obviously. He played in a kind of a hair metal band called Guilt. And so I said, hey, man, they're looking for a singer. Not a lot of people sang thrash metal back in those days or wanted to sing thrash metal. We're talking, this is mid-'86. It's not really widespread yet. Master of Puppets is just coming out. And so, hey, you want to send somebody a message from me? Go to Cameo.com.
You need some zippy coffee in the morning? Death Wish Coffee Company. Coffee at Safeway on the shelves.
Any of the shelves. And get your Zetro's Talking Vault t-shirt. grayhavenmedia.net. I went to rehearsals with Chuck for like 2 weeks and kind of sang them. It was all cool, even though, they were hurt and I was hurt too. We all cried the day I quit. We all did in the studio.
But you did everything you could to help them get
and
the
I
next
did,
singer.
And look at them, and then look at Chuck now. So
didn't you coach him a little bit too?
That's what I'm saying. I went to rehearsals for 2 weeks after to show him how to do the attack, because he came from a completely different type of metal band than that. And so, and I had always been thrash. That's how I started. That's where I was in. That's what I knew how to do. So now I've joined Exodus, and everybody knew it, and here comes my first 2 shows at the Farm.
And at the Farm, that wasn't a typical metal place. It was more of a punk place, right?
But a great place to have gigs.
I don't think there were too many metal gigs there.
It was kind of like an in-house thing, like a commune. People actually lived there.
Yeah,
Remember, like there was a garden in the back.
In the middle
of kind of
like underneath these freeways in San Francisco.
It's not there anymore.
Yeah, I think a park's there now. Yeah.
Are.
But I remember that night, and like I said, I'm a fan of Exodus, always was, and to see that this was going to happen, Zetro was going to sing one of my other favorite bands, Legacy, it was a high anticipation for this, and you could get in that night for $10.50.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Back then? No, I can't imagine.
And just as a coincidence, today happens to be the anniversary of when Exodus played their record release party at the Kabuki, just to throw that in there.
How many years now, Walt? 34? Yeah, 85, 34.
Yes, so
see, look at that. And these
just by chance,
us old farts are still killing it. So going into this, knowing that there's a lot of fans that are
pro and negative, right?
Well, half and half. The room split. You know what I mean? I had the Zetro supporters that knew I could do it and behind me, but then you had the true guys who were like old school who just hated, guys who were my friends but hated this idea. And so
I was excited for you for that.
Well, I'm glad you were, Walt. You were one of my friends back then.
I
the
went
guys
to both
who really
shows.
Didn't know me didn't really I don't think they cared too much. So my best memory of these shows is the first night
totally different nights, right? There
Well,
were two,
the first 4 songs, I had the video. I don't know where the VHS is, but I had it to study. I mean, full beers are
I
coming up.
remember.
People were buying full beers just to throw at me because they carried more weight and they felt that they could get a better shot
and
at
I'd
me.
never seen this, but I actually remember seeing someone throw an egg. You
At
know,
me?
well,
That
on
night?
stage or that, yeah,
Was
an
it that
S on
night?
egg because that's ingrained
Oh
in my
my.
memory. But
Well, I don't remember the egg, anyone,
stuff was
but
flying.
I don't doubt that it was one of those raspberries. Give them the tomatoes. All right, give, guys. People were throwing shit. And so I remember watching the video for like probably the first 4 or 5 songs. And yeah, it looked like choo, choo, choo. I mean, at one point I went down to sing this part and one just went bam, ba bam off my head. So yeah, it was kind of a target, but you know,
it was a wild show anyway, right? It was crazy.
We brought Paul out. You know, Paul came to the show, and we brought Paul out at the end, and I think both of us sang Piranha together, I believe.
I remember
And just to show everybody,
goodwill.
look, he knew that he couldn't carry on, and he was cool with it. You know, even though he was hurt over it, he wasn't. You know, and him and I were fine from then forever until he passed. I never had people always try to say, "Oh, how were you and Bailoff?" I go, "Oh my God, we were the greatest together. It wasn't me.
You shared the
I didn't
stage
have nothing
many
to do
times.
with that.
Yeah.
That was, you know, that was on those guys. You know what I mean? That was their decision. I'm the guy coming in. I didn't tell them, "Hey, I'm going to come in and sing your band." It wasn't like that at all. I came in and auditioned, and then it all went down. So that's kind of how that all went down, and then it went from there.
What about the second night now?
Well, second night
Well,
went
they
a
were
lot-
both sold out, right?
They were both sold out. The second night was a lot smoother, obviously, because after Paul had come out the first night, it was like cool. There was no beer cans. Besides, you know, my old man's, you know, mean-ass
That's
biker, and I had like 6 of his fucking partners in the fucking crowd making sure anybody throws one thing, I want them taken, and I'm not just taken out, and I mean taken out. And so, but ironically, they got lucky. Nobody threw a fucking beer can that night, so that worked out for them.
And to fill his shoes right then and there, you knew you were going to do it. And these 2 sold out shows, and it was like a passing of the guard at the time, you know?
Was definitely the beginning of an era.
Changing
especially
of the
an
guard.
Era for me, and in my era with Exodus is like any original singer does. You know, if you're like for me, I mean, I have Eddie tattooed here. I'm an Iron Maiden fan. I have been forever, and I love Paul Di'Anno, but you know, Bruce is Iron Maiden. You know what I mean? And I mean, I'm a Bon Scott. I have my own AC/DC band. I only do the Bon Scott era, but so many people identify Brian Johnson as the singer. You know, so I mean, even so, you know, I was the second singer. My mark on the band is, you know, is what it is, and I have obviously, you know, so much more records under my belt than, you know, both of the singers that were involved, but both great guys and both great eras. Because I'll say this, I like singing all the eras of all the bands. I mean, you know, there's a lot of singers that don't, you know, typically sing other people's eras. I think for me, it you know, it's not. I'm not trying to say, well, oh, that era didn't exist, or I'm not going to sing. There's so much catalog for me. Let's just load it full of my stuff. I think that by playing, you know, singing Always Bonded by Blood stuff, because that is the band's history, and the fans love it, and I'm a fan like you are, and I want to hear what the favorite songs too. You know, new stuff is great, but save that for the record and inside the car. When I come see you live, let me hear the hits. I hear you, man. I'm a fucking fan. I'm right with you, and I think that, you know, and singing Rob stuff as well is just, those are my funnest ones. I'm always offering, you know, let's sing Ballad of Leonard and Charles.
I love that.
I love that song. Let's sing, you know,
Downfall.
Children of a Worthless God. Let's sing Iconoclasm. Let's do that one. Whatever. I love that stuff. I don't shun that era or act like it didn't exist. Not at all.
And, you know, when you did join the band, I think there were a couple songs on Pleasures of the Flesh that were written and that Bailoff had done the vocals and sent some demos into the record company.
Yeah, Seeds of Hate, Brain Dead, and Pleasures of the Flesh, the song itself, actually. And I guess now in today's world, if you go on YouTube or you can find it. It's out there somewhere.
Yeah, I actually have a CD of it.
Do you?
Yeah, it's very rare. It's very rare.
Of course you do.
I think Craig and even quizzed me and said that he didn't think it existed, but it did, and I got it on CD. And the record company made a very limited amount of them, but it had Bailoff on there, and then here we are. And then you took 4 years to write that to put out that record.
What, Pleasures?
Yeah, isn't it?
No, just two.
Two, okay.
But it seemed like 4 back in the day, because back in the day, music, I mean, especially us and even our heroes, it seems like you put a record out every year or every other year. You know what I mean? So, to wait such a time for a new band to put out a debut record in 1985 and by 1986 not have a record out, and then actually almost 2 years and 3 months, because it came out in September of 87, finally your second record come out. When you're younger, that's a lot of time, man. That's a lot of time that's right. Passed, and you can lose ground there. But what's great is it worked out. The first record label that Exodus was with, Torrid didn't know what they were getting into, and either did the band, and Combat was willing to work with it.
Well, that's good. I know it took a long time to come out for the time, because, like you said, every year people were putting out albums. But it's still one of my favorite albums of the whole collection.
Well, it's my first record. It's my first actual real recording of going into doing an album. I'm actually going to talk about that pretty soon on some episodes of The Vault. I'm going to start talking about the records and going into them, and I'm going to start with Pleasures of the Flesh. So keep posted on that. Anything else on the farm, Walt?
It was a killer 2 nights. Part of Bay Area history right there. That was a monumental moment for me, definitely, and I know for a lot of fans.
It was for me too. First time with Exodus. So you guys, leave me comments. Were you there? Were you in San Francisco? What was the first time you saw me when you saw Exodus? Leave me comments. Obviously, subscribe to Zetro's Talking About, and we're going to be talking about more shit like this. But until then, for me and Mr. Walter Morgan, we'll see you in the vault real soon. Horns up, you fuckers.